Welcome back to Design Build Workshop. Today we're going to cover the design and build of the rear bumper and dual swing arm for my rig. When I was initially thinking about this project, I gathered some inspiration from photos on Pinterest and reviewed some video on the C4 swing arm system, which was the donor for this build. So one of the keys to the system that I designed for this carrier is that I needed to have many points of contact because I was concerned about the extended weight on the swing arms. So the bumper is 1/4 inch thick tubing, so it's really heavy. It's through bolted in about 8 or 9 places through the frame. The pivot pieces are 3/4 inch bolts that go all the way through into the bumper. And then this is one of the key parts right here. So I designed this modified plate to bolt into the holes that were in here before for the other piece that was here, which I'm not even sure what that looks like at this point. But this is all 1/4 inch steel. And so I wanted to have this to be nice and heavy so it could displace a lot of the pressure that was being put against this the tailgate. So I've got like a push-pull thing going on. So when this piece closes, there's a pad right here, and that's gonna touch right there, right? So now I'm pushing up against the bumper. Now, also, I transferred that stop that's from the old tailgate up here, and so it contacts this piece of tubing right here. Right, so they're both being pushed in that way. Now the other arm swings shut, and it goes against that one. And with this piece, that locks it against the bumper, and then this piece grabs it and presses it against the plate. So I've got the 2 pivots. That's an anchor point. I've got another anchor point here that's pulling up against the bumper. And I've got another anchor point here that's actually kind of pulling in the opposite direction up against the tailgate. I posted some of my build photographs on Facebook. I had a couple guys ask, hey, break out the welder. What's with all the bolts? But when I built this was a design aspect that I wanted to incorporate. And that is to have these bumperette pieces right here. And they actually are proud of the dual swing arms when they're closed, when there's nothing on them. And so everything else, all the bolts are stainless steel. So that's carried through the rest of the Jeep as well. My front bumper's done the same way. Some of the other pieces I have on here. It's all a semi-gloss black or a satin black and stainless steel hardware. These are aluminum. I turned these on my lathe, and that's incorporated as well in the front. With the other design pieces. So the way the bumper's held on, I've got it backed off the frame about 2 inches. And I've got a 2x3 piece of tubing on back of either one of these. And the bolts that go through here actually run all the way through the frame. So I've actually got eight bolts that carry all the way through into the frame that hold this piece in place. And then because I had so much compression, or I was concerned about so much weight coming down, I didn't want that cantilevered. So I made these pieces right here, which are 3/8 inch steel plate that's been formed, and it sisters the frame. And so it goes underneath this, and then it's bolted all the way through. So this actually is carrying a lot of the weight compression-wise off of the frame back to this part right here. When I do a lot of my designing and building, I like to think of things as being modular, which is one of the reasons that everything's not welded on here. So if something were to get damaged or I wanted to change something, all I really have to do is unbolt it and I can go with a different option. So most everything that I do as far as designing and building things that are especially they're functional, I want to be able to take them back off or change it if I want to. Whereas if I weld the whole thing up, now I'm grinding and cutting and finishing and all that kind of stuff. Whereas this, I'm just unbolting, and I can use the same bolt holes and reconfigure something if I want to, or just plain out remove it. So that's a lot of the reason why I do or build things the way I do. A lot of the stuff I have is bolted and is meant to be taken apart. If something gets damaged or whatever, I can handle that. So this swing arm or carrier system is actually off Toyota Tacoma, or an aftermarket Toyota Tacoma piece. Because the Toyota is longer or wider than the Jeep TJ, I had to cut them down by about 4.5 inches for it to fit. So I basically cut the tubing right here and then removed about 2.5 inches and then welded it back. I'm gonna take this thing in to get it inspected, which I have to remove the arms anyway, because it's not gonna pass because they block the taillights a little bit, which is another project that's gonna come up where we're gonna make a new housing for these, and they're gonna extend almost out to the edge right here, kind of like the way a J or a JL does, to kind of move this out to the outside. And that way I won't have to worry about interfering with this. But fitting these from the Tacoma wasn't that hard. I actually picked these up Facebook Marketplace. And the great thing about this was the guy didn't have the bumper part. He only had the swing arms and the hardware. And because of that, he couldn't sell it for I think the thing goes for $2,000 or $3,000. I picked up the swing arms and the hardware for $100. So that worked out great for me putting this together. I started this build a little backward, and that's because I purchased the dual swing arm setup before I had the materials for the rear bumper. It was another 6 months before I stumbled on the heavy 2x6 tube I was looking for, which I also found on Facebook Marketplace for another great deal. First step was to cut the V's in the tube to make the tapers, then form the remaining strap to the new shape and weld it up. I was very careful with cutting down and re-welding the swing arms to avoid any twist or misalignment, because that would have made things very difficult with the final assembly. The next step was to place the laser cut and formed swing arm mounts to the bumper, taking an account for the width of the assembled swing arms and offset from the body of the Jeep. The mounts are held in place with 1/4-20 stainless bolts, and once the swing arm is attached, it will also be secured with the 3/4 inch bolt acting as the pivot. Once the pivot mounts were set, I could place the bumperette pieces, align and drill the holes for mounting and for the aluminum spacers. When placing the shackle mounts, it was important to make sure I put them in a place that would allow me to drill through the frame without interference, to allow the bolts to go through the shackle mount, bumper, 2-inch extensions, and the frame. I cut an opening in the back of the bumper on each side so I could access where the 3/4 bolt enters into the tube. Because I did this, I also drilled drain holes into the bottom of the bumper to prevent water from standing within the tube. The swing arms had a sprung pin that would catch the plate to hold the swing arm in an open position. I also drilled a hole for the closed position to keep the arms closed even if the latches failed. I would not suggest doing this as it's a pain, and you have to lift the pins every time I want to access the cargo area. When I attached the bumper support, I had to drill a couple of access holes so I could feed the lock washer and the nut into the frame when securing it. I did this with a step drill, which worked out pretty well. I did a lot of test fitting when most of the fabrication was done and before I sent all the parts to the powder coater. There was a little amount of adjustments that had to be made, but nothing too bad. Of course, the best part is getting all the parts back from the powder coater and bolting everything together, just like Christmas morning. Here are some additional photos of the build. If you are enjoying this content, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate your support and hope to create more content like this soon. Thanks again for joining me on another episode of Design Build Workshop. See you next time.